Claire Wasserman here, founder and author of Ladies Get Paid, where I help thousands of people build better work lives. Today's episode is just a bit different from what you're used to. Instead of me coaching, though I do a bit of that at the end, I'm actually interviewing a job seeker who turned their job search into an entire community building opportunity by creating a newsletter that documents their entire journey, rejections and all. In this episode, you'll learn how to craft a compelling job search email that activates your network and really gets them to want to help you. You'll also learn strategies for making career pivots without having to start completely from scratch, effective networking techniques that don't feel transactional or inauthentic, negotiation tactics for when you're overqualified for a position, and how to leverage AI tools like ChatGPT to strengthen, not replace, but strengthen your job search materials. Let's get started. I wanted Shriya here today because she did something very savvy, very smart, and very vulnerable. Effectively, you created a job seeker newsletter where you detailed the process, your process of looking for work. Shriya, Navadia, I want to welcome you here. And I like to just dive in right away to some context behind this email. I received it. Actually, my wife did. She gave it to me, which I don't know, I guess she broke the rules because at the top it said, please don't share with anyone. Hey, listen, now we're sharing it with all of Ladies Get Paid. And
Yeah.
but in short, this was a series of emails that you have been sending where you are letting people in on your experience of looking for work. Of course, part of that is activating your network to help you. It's compelling, it's strategic. I'm invested. I want other people to be invested and most importantly, inspired by you. So, talk to me a little bit about first some context to being, I don't know if you got laid off, you chose to leave, like the beginning of the job search experience for you, and then your decision to send out. Is this a newsletter?
Absolutely. Okay, so I won't go too far into the history, but I overall have 10 years of experience, a lot of it building technology communities for startups. And I had my dream job for 2 years during COVID at this company, On Deck. We built a lot of membership communities for founders and other people. And unfortunately, I was there for 2 years, about spring 2020 to spring 2022. And the company kind of downsized a lot. And so I chose to leave, but then they did 2 rounds of layoffs. And that summer 2022 is the last time I did a really wide job search. Since then, I've had 3 roles at another a venture-backed startup, then a VC firm, and then most recently helping my friend run like a startup management training program. But for each of those, I only aimed at that one thing. I guess for the first one in another venture-backed startup, I did a wide search and I talked to maybe 40 to 50 companies. But frankly, OnDeck was like a hot company at the time. So I just posted on social media and people came inbound to me. And then when I reached out to other companies, they had heard of us because it was a community business in the startup world, we had interfaced and I had personally interfaced with tons of founders and investors. And so that was a little bit of it was too easy. It was artificially easy because it was ZERP, it was COVID, everyone was at home, everyone had free time. And so I was like, wow, I got a big ego. I was like, I'm this in-demand candidate. Everyone loves me. I'm hot shit. Like now I've managed people, I've managed a business line. Yay me. And then I actually, after leaving the VC firm last spring, I had health issues last summer. So I took time fully off from work. And then in the fall, I reached out to the friend who I'm working with now on Fortlight, her management training program. And I told her up front, I was like, I'm going to be searching for software jobs on the side. But I chickened out all fall. I didn't do anything. And then this January, I picked one company that I was really excited about. And I went all in for a month and a half, but unfortunately it didn't work out. And I'll describe the all in process because I think that from talking to friends, I think I do more than most people do. Like I do a lot of supplemental work, but it just wasn't a fit for what they were looking for. And you can't always control that. Like you can make yourself the best candidate for yourself, but they wanted specifically, they were like, you need B2B SaaS and fintech experience right before this. And I can't change my past jobs. So I thought that I did, hey, even though I haven't worked at those places, I can say that I can. And they were like, other candidates actually did. When that didn't work out, I had seen another friend who was an exited founder send a series of newsletters last November and December. She sent four, and I didn't know how many people she sent it to, but she detailed her whole job search, what she was looking for, and how her thinking evolved. So over each newsletter, she didn't say what she got rejected from, and I asked her afterwards, I said, I want to write this, like, give me some tips. And she's, you include what you got rejected from, and I was scared to put that. But she said, here's my criteria. And the next newsletter should be like, okay, I expanded from New York and included SF. Or I was previously looking at like health tech and I realized that I'm less excited every time I do a health tech call. And so she would have her evolution every newsletter. And she said, honestly, as an exit founder who was in YC, I thought this would be faster and it took way longer. And that's what I've heard from a lot of people who consider ourselves like mid-level candidates with a 8 to 12 years of experience, and it's just a bad market. So people are taking 4, 6, 8 months. So knowing that, and after I had put all my eggs in one basket and it didn't work, between her newsletter and a few other conversations, I was like, you know what? Fine. It's been almost 3 years since I've done a really wide search and not just picked one thing and put all of my energy into that. And so I had built a CRM of all my contacts after leaving On Deck because I was like, I've met so many people in 2 years. I'm going to forget them if I don't write this up. And I went back and then I literally just made a column on it. And I just went through each person and said, yes, include them on the newsletter. It's a lot of people. It was maybe 250 for edition one and then 400 for edition two. Most people will not have that big of a list. I promise there are not random people in there, but I have just met a lot of people by being in community. Yeah, that's why I chose to send it. And the context of why now, it's like a mix of job search being harder. And I just want to be more strategic in my next decision because the previous ones, I did not. I just said, oh, I want to work in VC. What's the easiest VC opportunity I can get? Oh, my friend who already wanted to hire me. Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, this is super helpful. Let's talk a little bit nuts and bolts of what you decided to include in the newsletter, maybe what you didn't include. Obviously, you took inspiration from your friend, and I absolutely love that. I hope everybody watching or listening, this is what we should be doing. We should be leaning on each other. If you see somebody do something you admire, ask them about it or replicate it in your way. So you put what your experience was, because right now I'm reading what it is. Okay, so what your experience was the last 5 years, bulleted out what you're looking to learn and experience next, both in the immediate and long term. You put ideal qualities of the next company and role. You put definite no's, which I love. So your deal breakers. Actually, before we get into deciding what you wanted to include in the newsletter, how did you even figure this stuff out? This is like serious self reflection to your point of you wanted to be more strategic in your next step. That requires knowing who you are, which will then
Mhm.
help you figure out knowing what you want to do. So, if you have any tips about that process of self exploration and drawing a line in the sand, definite no's, no pre seed or seed stage, no over 5K employees.
Yeah.
Yeah, talk to me about that.
No crypto or deep tech, nothing outside of New York SF. I'm not moving to DC or Chicago or anything. Yeah, so honestly, I have been kind of obsessed with understanding where my passion lies, what I want to do since like age 12, but probably in earnest since college. And so each move I've made in my career, I had a specific reason to take it. And I was like, now I want to be a PM. Now I want to be a founder. Now I want to work at a larger scale. But honestly, even though I did that, when I look back, I joined so many small startups where the company wasn't doing well enough for me to stick around beyond 1 or 2 years. So I have a string of short stints. And part of what I reflected on is, hey, I'm 32. I have 10 years of experience. I'm not like a kid anymore. And also, I want to start a family. And when I talk to people who are in their 30s and 40s in tech, it's I didn't see a path where I could keep bouncing around to different pre-seed startups and learn that much. I've already learned a lot about how to be scrappy, and I wanted to look like build at a larger scale. So instead of just floundering around and with each next step, I'm like, now I want to try VC, now I want to try this. I was like, okay, holistically, if I had to write out four qualities where I think I could stick around at that company for a longer time, what would those be? Location, industry, position, manager, and team, who I learned from and why. And then I wrote those up, and I would hope that I'm being more strategic this time than I was in the recent past just by learning a lot more about the industry too. Like, I do think in each of my roles, I learned a lot of what I wanted to learn, but unfortunately, they just weren't the kinds of places I thought I would be there long term at On Deck. So that was more of like the company itself pivoting away from that. But for other roles, I wanted to learn something specific. And I just don't think that because I didn't do a long checklist,
Mhm.
it just had one reason to join
Mhm.
rather than having five reasons to join. And because I didn't do a wide search of trying to reach out to 30, 40, 50 companies, I would just take the thing in front of me. And so I've been doing self-reflection for 10 years. Basically, what I'm saying is I've been doing self-reflection, but I haven't had the discipline to reach out a lot, which forces you to be rejected and spend way more time on the search and struggle through months of being vulnerable and frustrated and getting to the end and not getting it. So there was that job in January that I was super excited about, didn't ultimately get it. There was another recently where I was in the final two and I was just the person who didn't get it. And both of those were really nice rejections because they weren't like they didn't just send a form, they were like, "Hey, here's four things we really liked about you, but here's two things that were missing." So
Ah,
I knew that I was generally on the right track.
okay.
And I just told myself in the past, I would have just picked this, only done this, been depressed for 2 weeks after.
Mm.
And now I want to do the real search where I accept the crap, the frustrating time, rather than just taking the first thing in front of me, even if it's not actually an ideal long-term move.
Yeah, I think part of this is seeing that it's all good in the sense of when you apply for jobs, you are expanding your network. You are practicing your vulnerability muscle. Like these are things that are going to serve you well, regardless of if you get the job.
Yeah.
And that makes cushioning the rejection easier and not in a BS silver lining kind of way. Like you truly are growing through this. And something I love in this newsletter that you're sharing with these people in your network is your growth here, like what you're discovering about yourself through this process. I know we're not going to talk about the specific companies that you weren't accepted by and et cetera, but you put this out there. Why share the rejection with this network of yours?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly. I think I'm probably too much of an open book to people. Like I'm just the kind of person who blabs the truth to my friends and network. And so I think I thought if I would tell them this on a call, I want to put it in the email so they know what types of roles I applied to and got close to.
Yes.
Then they hear some actual companies because quite a few friends from the first one, they were like, "Hey, this is a little long. Like, I love this, but why don't you just put at the top, intro me to these 20 companies? And then it'll be really actionable and I can do it." And I was like, actually, I get that, but it's a little different than what I was trying to do. I was mimicking the other friends, which was very reflective and thoughtful. And my assumption is that a lot of people won't read it, but
Uh-huh.
some people will skim it and then they'll be like, cool, now I get a sense of what you're looking for. Here's a place. And so that's why in the first one, I didn't have actual processes and names. I just said I applied to only five. And it's a small volume, but I always get referrals and do a big process. It's not a volume search. But in the second, I was like, actually, let me just tell them the names so that if they've heard of any of these, they're like, cool, this is the kind of place Shreya is applying to. And even if it's not working, like this is where she gets further in the process. So now I have an idea of what I can tell her. And I also want to keep people posted on. I'm in process with two roles. My
Mhm.
next edition, I'm now in process with maybe six, even since this past week. And I want to keep saying that to people so that it also maybe conveys a sense of urgency where
Uh-huh.
they're like, oh, cool, I thought of this company, didn't really intro you yet when I got the other ones, but are you at the end? Should I intro you now and try and do a fast process? And I'll be like, yeah, thanks.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's such a balance because I do think being specific is exactly correct. That's people don't know how to help you unless you tell them exactly. And by saying these are the companies that I'm applying to or I'm in the process of or would like to, now they can go, all right, I know somebody there.
Yeah.
But the balance, the delicate balance is too much information, what people will read or not read. Or honestly, this is a marketing document, right? This is the same issue any company would have in putting themselves out there and saying, here's why you should be invested in me. There's so much I could say, but saying too much might distract or dilute. So again, I appreciate that you had the template to follow and then you got to customize for yourself, but are you customizing as you go through each edition? So presumably you'll send out a third newsletter, maybe a fourth, a fifth. How can you envision yourself evolving what you share with people? In other words, what has been the experience of sharing this process with hundreds of people?
Yeah, it's been I honestly, I think I had been underestimating the value of content for years because because I've been in community, I would always optimize for relationships and events.
Mhm.
And I've been a little bit afraid of content. I love posting on Twitter and LinkedIn, and I have a decent following that's also helped those jobs come inbound. But I just didn't get the value of newsletters. I subscribed to too many and didn't read them. But then when I sent this, I was like, this is so powerful. Why didn't I do this sooner? Because obviously 300 people didn't reply, but 25 did. And in the first one, I will say part of why I wasn't targeted is because I was scared. I didn't feel ready to get a lot of intro. And so when people were like, oh, this isn't very easy to use because this isn't forwardable, I was like, I know. I'm afraid to do it. And then
Yeah.
in the second, I told people, hey, I sent you this Beehive email with a cute template and colors and whatever, but I told you not to forward it. So I actually also sent to every single person a plain text forwardable email. And
Mhm.
then people did forward it because that was way easier. And it said my background and bullet points and resume and LinkedIn. And they were like, they would forward me the thread afterwards and be like, cool, here's an intro to X, here's an intro to Y. And when people ask, "Oh, cool, this is what I was looking for in the first email," and I was like, "Yeah, I
Mhm.
wasn't ready. Like, I'm still human. I still chicken out from some stuff just because I'm putting myself out there in a way that maybe looks like it's more than others. There's still stuff I'm holding back."
Uh-huh. I love that you said that because so many people look at this like it's binary. Oh, you must be an extrovert or not afraid, or are you kidding me? I'm freaking out all the time and I'm still putting myself out there, but also there's levels to it and it's an iterative process, not to use a buzzword from startup life. Something I absolutely love that you did in here is you said thank you to MVPs and you gave shout
Yes.
outs and again, specific shout outs. So you said Emily Kramer from MKT1 for real talk about community roles within marketing. I was like, honestly, I wanted a link to their LinkedIn.
Yeah, yeah. I was like, should I link it or can they maybe look them up? I was like, oh, are 10 people gonna bug them? I don't know. Let me just
Right.
say their names, then they can clearly just paste into Google. But yeah, I'd seen so many people do that before. It's been a huge part of the communities I've worked on, where we have a whole Slack channel where people just thank other people and it makes them feel so good. And I actually saw it in that same friend, Erica's newsletter. And so I was like, let
And
me include it. Let me
it's
do
great.
this. Yeah.
By the way, yeah, let's talk a little bit about your background in running community. How did what you did for your job or jobs inform how you are running your job search, if at all?
Yeah, like I said, I think I underestimated the power of content. And I will say the way I got into communities is while I was an undergrad, I found or stumbled on a few Facebook groups that were for actually just people going to hackathons, to college hackathons, but then they really just turned into like career advice forums. And they were super active. There were kids from across the country. And then we would meet up at hackathons that we were going to. And at the time, I was studying computer science. I was never really a great programmer, but I loved hackathons because I loved the energy. I love big events. I love meeting people. I was like, this is so fun. This is so cool. You're like building a project with others. But then I would slot myself into a pitch and presentation role, and I'd be like, I'll make the pitch deck and then not build a lot and give you design feedback, which kind of lends itself to like why I'm on the sales and marketing side now and why I love that. But I was so into these groups, but I was applying to UX design roles as my first job. And then a person I reached out to was like, hey, I saw a community role. Would you maybe be interested in this? And I was like, oh my God, I can do my side passion as a job. And then every time I did that for my first two jobs, and I was in San Francisco, and San Francisco is if you're not technical, you're an idiot. And so I was like, I have to get technical again. I'm an idiot. I have no career path. So I went to a coding boot camp after a CS degree because I didn't really know much. And I was like, okay, fine. I have to do this. And I wasn't even a great student. I like tuned out halfway through, but I networked the whole summer and then I got a engineering role that was like engineering and design hybrid, but I said I really want to be a PM. And so you said because you haven't been one, we can't do that out the gate, but I could mentor you and prep it and over time you can transition into that. So I did that for 9 months, but even at that job, 3 months in, I restarted my female founder community that I'd started in undergrad on the side. I could not stop building communities. And over time, I was like a member of the wing. I participated in so many. I was a huge fangirl.
Mhm.
And I kept coming back to, okay, I like building online communities. I like hosting hackathons. I'm going to learn how to run a retreat because I went to a retreat that was amazing. I'm going to learn how to do lots of virtual events. I'm going to get better at hosting. And I built out this skill set. There were definitely times I questioned it. There were a lot of people around me who questioned it. They're like, this isn't a real thing. I don't get it. It doesn't seem like you're still really in tech, like Shriya, like, why are you doing this? Why don't you pivot? But I loved it so much and I believed in it. And I was helping people get jobs, helping people find co-founders. And it was so useful and valuable. Just like I had this detour into product, I also had a detour where I was like, should I actually be an investor? But I didn't like it. I'm not a research analyst type. But I still believe in it, maybe in a slightly different way. Part of why I want to be back in software is because building communities of founders felt like I was enabling tech, but not actually in tech anymore. And now it's been 6 years since I worked at a software company and not a community company. And so that's part of why I want to say, hey, I've fleshed out the skill set a lot. Why don't believe that community can has a lot of overlapping skills with sales and marketing and success. Why don't I figure out what that looks like and pitch it to people? And I have asked ChatGPT a million questions to understand, like, I'm like, what are all these marketing roles? What the hell does demand gen and lifecycle marketing mean? I've been at tiny startups. We just had one person who was called marketing. Yeah. There's been so much that I've had to adjust in this specific process to say, okay, how do I go from these community businesses and translate into language that software companies will understand? But still at least start with this thing that I love and I feel like I'm really good at now. Even if within those companies, maybe I'll pivot to some other title that I'm not sure about yet.
Okay, there's a couple of things you touched on that I know people listening and watching have tons of questions about. First, we can talk about networking. You're
Yeah.
obviously just naturally skilled at that. I think sometimes when we're naturally good at something, it's hard to articulate it, but you're now in the practice of doing that because you're looking for work. So I want to talk to you about any tips you have for people who maybe feel like, oh gosh, I'd like to be like Shreya, but I'm just not, in terms of activating one's network.
So like networking is the foundation of everything. So yeah, should I just describe my
Yeah.
process?
Have you ever felt some people have this emotional block, right? They feel like just even the word makes them nauseous. So I always like to say, okay, it's not networking, it's connecting, it's
Yeah.
community building, it's paying it forward. It's so talk to me about if you ever had that mental emotional block with networking. If so, how'd you move through it? If not, how did you get strategic with it and not feel like you were sacrificing authenticity for that strategy?
I honestly think this was something I was driven to do for a long time. Like in like when I grew up, I wanted to be more charismatic and for people to listen to me as a leader, but they didn't. And so in middle school, I studied people who like told stories and made everybody really interested, or I would read magazines and hear how all these successful people thanked others in their life or had pictures with other famous people from other industries. And I was like, this looks so cool. I'm going to move to New York City. I'm going to be friends with a fashion
Where
designer.
did you grow up, by the way? What's your background?
Upstate New York in a tiny town called Queensbury, which is like north of Albany
Okay.
and not very exciting. And so that's why I like was living vicariously through these magazines. And thankfully, it's like my parents would get it sent as a credit card extra
Uh-huh.
and like, here's a free magazine.
Yeah.
And I was like, these are cool. I'm obsessed with this. Like, I want to be a magazine editor. You just find out everything going on in the world and talk to cool people. And that's when it started. I also knew because I talked to my parents about the college search. I would see people from the bigger city, from Albany, because I did like Indian dance and some Indian stuff there because there was no one where I lived, but there were Indian people in Albany. So we would drive back and forth an hour to meet Indian people. And then I found out in high school that they got internships. I was like, how the hell do you get an internship in high school? And then they would always be like, oh, my dad's friend referred me to his law firm. My like mom's college friend got me into her biology lab. And I was like, what? And then I also went to summer like nerd camps. And I found out that everyone's doing this stuff through relationships and networking. And I asked my parents, I was like, do you have fancy people I can talk to? And they were like, no, sorry. I was like, what the hell? Come on. Hello, chop chop. Introduce me to the fancy people. And so when I got into college and even at those summer programs, I was like, this is the thing. Like, I need to know cool people doing other stuff with more connections than me because I didn't go to a fancy private school. I'm not from New York City. I don't have this big fancy network. I just have to build it from scratch. And so I've been really into that since college. But like some part of me somehow knew that maybe it was also through seeing people do it like wrong. I went to tech events in Boston. I went to Tufts undergrad, so I tapped into Boston a lot.
Mhm.
Like Harvard, MIT, Northeastern, BU, stuff downtown. There was like a Microsoft center that hosts a lot of things. I just went on meetup.com and RSVP'd to random stuff. And I would do the boring, awkward networking at the beginning of an event, watch a talk that was not interactive at all, and
Mm.
then do the awkward networking at the end. And when I talked to people, it's just rude, but I was like, I wonder if these really, I was 19. And then I would talk to people in their late 20s and 30s, but they seemed really lost. And I was like, I wonder if the people who are going to a random event 8 to 15 years into their career are not really the most impressive and networked people because they wouldn't need to go to this event at that stage in their career if they knew what they were doing. And so I was like, what did the speakers do? Because they did things really well. And then the people I talked to in the room seemed, yeah, I don't know. I'm just like trying to figure it out. I'm trying to like network. Here's my business card. And I was like, this is terrible. I don't want to get someone's random business card. We have this forced conversation where we have nothing in common. They're like, oh, you're an undergrad who's looking for a UX design internship. I don't know anything about that, but here's a long lecture of my background. Okay, here's a business card. Bye. And so I watched what was not the way to do it. And I listened really attentively to what the speakers would say. And they'd be like, I kept in touch with my college friend. Then they became my co-founder. Then I like went through my like husband's childhood friend and he happened to be doing something in the same industry. And I was like, okay, you keep in touch with all the people, you actually stay friends with the people you get along with. You don't force a friendship with people you don't vibe with, even if they're in your industry or relevant somehow, because that doesn't feel fun. I also did random coffee meetings where I had moved to San Francisco, knew nobody in San Francisco because I had been in upstate New York, visited New York a few times, like New York City, and went to school in Boston. So not a lot of people were there from college. And so I went back to those hackathon Facebook groups and I just DM'd people who I'd talked to and said, let's get coffee, let's get coffee. A lot of those were terrible. Nothing in common, no connection, would never be friends. And I was like, am I doing something wrong? Should I learn how to get better at these coffees? And then when I talked to people who were more experienced for advice, a few of them said, and then people said in podcasts, people said in in-person talks, like authentic networking is just building friendships and relationships. Do not force something where you have nothing in common, you don't connect, and it's really awkward. You don't have to. Like the startup world is really about paying it forward and helping each other. And you don't have to, like, don't be transactional. And I would see other people try and use things, and they'd be like, oh, you run this community? Can you spam every single person and tell them to sell my startup? And I was like, no, why would I? No, why would I do that? So I learned from watching what people weren't doing in a way that I thought was really helpful and listened to like famous people from blog posts and podcasts and other stuff I mentioned that I thought were doing it well. And then I tried stuff and I tried like some stuff that didn't work. I think I tried like selling and pitching in a Facebook group and then no one would engage because it was like an ad.
Right.
Who cares? Nobody wants to talk to an ad. And so I learned to be very relationship first. But going back to your original question of if people want to do this,
Mhm.
I don't think this works for everyone. You have to want to do it and love it. You can certainly learn how to be like this. I'm not like, oh, it's innate, so you can't.
Mhm.
But if this is painful to you and difficult, there's so many other ways that people have built a network. Like, I know a lot of developers who've built an amazing network by sharing cool things on Product Hunt or Twitter, and they meet other builders.
Yeah.
And they don't need to be like super social. They're really just a bunch of builders and they just hang out together and build stuff together. Then I've also met a lot of people who love content marketing and you meet them face to face and they're a little introverted. And so I think don't force yourself to do this, but keep in mind, like, how do I build an authentic network that I can keep in touch with The other thing is the keeping in touch with. I added everyone on Facebook back when we were using Facebook, and some people made fun of me for it. They're like, Shriya, you'll have one conversation with someone and then add them on Facebook. And I was like, yeah, I know. I decided in my head that I'm going to do that. And then if some people think it's weird, I don't care. Because if I have a second or third conversation, I'll be like, I do that for everyone. Don't worry about it. And then I started doing it on LinkedIn, and now I do it on like LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. And
Mhm.
it's been crazy helpful because I follow a zillion people and trust the algorithm to show me I got a new job, I got married, I had a baby, I'm looking for a new job. And then I engage with that if I want to. And that way I can low key keep in touch with thousands of people without keeping all of them top of mind or going beyond like the Dunbar number of people I can like really be connected to or care about. Because the great thing about social media is you see their name and face in that little profile. So
Yes.
I'll recognize a face over and over, even if we did have two conversations 8 years ago.
By the way, speaking of faces, I love in that first email you sent as part of your newsletter, you're like that you put a picture of yourself just in case you forgot what I look like, which made me made me laugh.
It tells you like I didn't send it to 50 people. I sent it to 400. There were
Right.
some people where I was like, I wonder if you don't even know me by name. You maybe just know my face on social media.
Uh-huh.
A picture I've used for 10 years. So like, here it is.
I thought it was great. And you had a little emoji. Just to recap the fundamentals here, you say, and I agree, the way to community build, the way to network, the way to connect is going to look different for different people, as it should. However, I think the underlying elements here is provide value first, be consistent, and then maybe be a little shameless, just in the sense
Yeah.
of putting yourself out there, adding people just a tiny bit outside of your comfort zone. Question though, systems. You mentioned building your own CRM. I don't know if you used Airtable, if you're putting calendar reminders on to, hey, reach out to this person once a quarter. Like, how do you sustain the energy required to do all of this?
I don't. There are times that I just don't tap into or catch up with anyone if I'm feeling really overwhelmed or other stuff is happening in my personal life. And so I'll have like sprints. And you'd be surprised, like all of us are really busy. We have different phases of our life related to our job and personal life. And people have been super amenable to me reaching out after years of nothing. Like they might be saying in the background if they don't respond, like, oh, this Shriya girl's annoying. But I don't care like about what you're saying about being shameless. Everyone who responds or engages is like, hey, great to hear from you. Can't believe it's been 7 years. So I just reconnected with a person from undergrad where we were barely in touch at all since like even sophomore year, not the end. And he just reached out on LinkedIn and goes, hey, saw a bunch of your LinkedIn posts about tech. I've been in film and TV, and film and TV is not doing super well. So I want to see if I can work in a startup that's related to film and TV. And we had an amazing, fun call.
Mhm.
So the quarterly and annual thing, I tried doing that in my CRM. Like the way I built the CRM was like I was just inspired to do a sprint, and I spent a weekend putting 20 hours into it. It's hard to force yourself to do that because I told myself for years and years before that I wanted to, and I like bookmarked other people's examples. But I think because it was right after On Deck, that's what pushed me. And I said, I've met so many people, I need to track this, otherwise I will forget them. And it's been useful, but I don't look at it all the time.
Uh-huh.
I basically 3 months might pass, and I'm like, all right, let me update it. What I do is I tiered people, and I actually hired someone on Upwork to fill in stuff like their LinkedIn's and emails and just look those up, which kind of helped, not fully helped. There was a lot of stuff I had to do myself still. The tiers were just in my mind. I wrote the tiers, talked to these people once a month, once a quarter, twice a year, once a year, whatever. Then I didn't action on them because it's too many people. Like it's 2,000 people. I
Mhm.
can't actually, I've added everyone I've ever spoken to and then a big chunk of people I want to speak to. And yeah, it's way too many people. So part of why I do the like following a zillion people on social media is again so that the algorithm just shows me the big things rather than me trying to force like talk to this person.
Uh-huh.
But the way it does help is when I ranked the closeness, I literally invite the top people to my birthday parties.
Uh-huh.
And that's how I've created my wedding list because sure, for my 10 besties, they would come to mind, but for the like next, like the final like 20 to 30 people who I wasn't quite as close to, but I really loved them and spending time with them and want to keep in touch long term, I was like, I really don't want to forget anyone. Let me look at my CRM. The only people who are not in my CRM are my mom, dad, and husband. Every single other person, even including like different cousins, are on there. And I just tag them as friends and family. So it's not professional. It's, hey, I want to maintain lots and lots of relationships, but how do I do it? Another thing I want to mention, because I blanked on what it is. Oh, you were saying bring value first. I actually read a few years ago and then kept this in mind that if you ask someone for a favor, they think of you favorably and you don't have to feel like you have to give them something.
Mm.
So I kept that in mind for people who were, in my opinion, like really intimidating and more experienced than me. And when I was starting that female founder group and I was 24 or 25, I was like, I'm intimidated by C-suite women and pre-seed or seed stage female founders. But I sent a zillion cold emails. Like I didn't go through intros, I was just scared of asking a lot of intros. And those people, some of them are on my newsletter. We've kept in touch. And mostly I've asked them for help like 4 times.
Uh-huh.
A lot of them, I have not been able to help them. We still have I think a good relationship and they're happy to hear from me. And I've just been like, can you be a guest speaker for this? Can you mentor my friend for this? Can you blah, blah, blah.
Those are opportunities for them, though. That's the thing that I want to
Yeah,
understand.
yeah, they're not just drains, but they're also like, honestly, if there's someone with good visibility, they don't need to do an extra talk, especially
Uh-huh.
to a private group that won't be public. So I would think of that a little bit too in regards to being shameless. If you have someone you admire so much and you've been following them for a long time, because I love The Wing, I idolized Audrey Gelman for many years and I was like a huge fangirl and followed a lot of stuff she did. And I reached out to her a few times. And then after I reached out to her like 4 times, she was like, great to hear from you. Love that you've been a fan for so long of The Wing. And I was like, wow, you
Mhm.
noticed my name over and over. And then
Uh-huh.
finally, when I was building a startup, there was something relevant to talk about to ask her advice. And we had one call and I like freaked out. But
Uh-huh.
that was like a long game that I played. But really, I was always asking her for stuff.
Uh-huh.
I was not sharing stuff, but I think people appreciate being appreciated and being
Uh-huh.
like admired and inspired and you saying, I love your book. I
Right.
think your business is amazing. I think your career is so cool.
That feels good. It feels good to
Yeah,
hear.
it feels
And also, by the
great.
way, we're
Great.
all suffering. Everybody's exhausted
Yeah.
and going through crap. So just hearing that is amazing. And guess what? They can say no. I think women are so
Yeah.
afraid to burden others for a number of reasons. We're socialized that way, that we're afraid by simply asking, it's now a problem. Whereas the problem is if the other person says yes, and they shouldn't have. And that's honestly their problem. That means they needed to set better boundaries. We're
And
not
I had
responsible
to
for
learn
other
it.
people's
Yeah.
reactions.
And I was the person who said yes to way too many things. Like I had to learn a lot of these things through practice. I said yes to so many things and that overwhelmed myself and I wouldn't stick to my promises to people. And a few years ago, I was like, I have to stop doing this. This is so immature.
Yeah.
And another thing is people, when they're in college or high school, whenever they start reaching out to people, I've heard a lot of kids be like, oh, this person ghosted me. And then I'd be like, did they ghost you? And they were like, I sent them a cold email and they never replied. And I'm like, that's not ghosting you. You never started a conversation. A lot of these people are not going to reply to you.
Huh.
Take a ton of shots on goal and do not be offended if someone doesn't reply to you because you're intentionally reaching out to someone you admire who's busier than you. So I had to learn that the hard way myself. And then I've also supported a lot of younger people being like, try to build a thicker and thicker skin over time so that these don't each hurt. Like right now in the job search, I have my list of jobs and I've been trying to find a referral for each one and I send an email to people. But if they never reply, I'm gonna bump it like I'm gonna do 3. I'm gonna do the main email and 2 reminders.
Mm.
But if they don't reply after that, I'm gonna be like, that's okay. I'm not assuming just because I put them on a spreadsheet if I ask for a referral, like how rude they didn't give it to me. Maybe they're not connected to that role. Maybe they frankly weren't that impressed with me or don't really know what I did, so they don't feel comfortable putting their name behind me. And or maybe they're crazy busy, or maybe something happened in their personal life. I don't know. It's okay. It's okay that every single cold email doesn't get a reply.
But to your point of the algorithm, I know we're talking about inboxes and not social media feeds here, but I think the name visibility in an inbox, actually to your point earlier about Audrey, like she saw your name and
Yeah.
that does count. I want to just talk about pivoting real quick here because you're trying to make the case, and it sounds like you're doing it pretty successfully and that you're getting to the final rounds of interviews, which is awesome. Also frustrating too, though. You're saying, hey, listen, I have experience over here, but this is why it's transferable. What have you found to work and what's not working? And is there any, just so I can, if I can be helpful in any way in this moment with you, walking through so many coaching challenges you might be having? I'd love to spend the next couple of minutes doing that.
Yeah. Okay. So I told you how I came up with the strategy of what to pivot to, but another thing I kept reading was elite business school job advice because I was like, okay, I didn't go to a fancy business school, but maybe I can learn almost everything, like everything they do about jobs. So many people go to these to make a pivot, but what they tell you is pivot like the industry or the job or something else, but pick one thing you're
Uh-huh.
pivoting around.
Yeah.
Don't try to pivot everything at once. So some of those friends who don't really understand community at all, they're like, why don't you do customer marketing? Why don't you do life cycle marketing? Why don't you do success? And I'm like, I don't want to change two things at once because it'll torpedo my chances way lower. And so I'm trying to do the same title, the same level, but a different industry. So I'm trying to change one thing at once. And I've heard this a lot of times, and I generally really recommend it because that way in the interviews, I'm like, hey, here's all my community skills. Here's how they apply to B2B software. I don't say in the interview, I have not worked in B2B software.
Hmm.
I'm not like calling it out because they can see that if they dig in. And On Deck was venture backed, Silva was venture backed. I worked at the glider place where I did PM before, but that was so many years ago that nobody really asks about it or notices it because there's other stuff at the top of my LinkedIn. But and I've invested in software. Like I'm not far from it. And sometimes people have said it like the jobs I lost because of the B2B SaaS and fintech lack of experience, but it's not something I highlight. And then I have a really good story to tell. So I would recommend doing that. If pivot one thing at a time, and then there are frankly job titles where I massaged it. Like program director at On Deck was really GM at another place. It was owning a business line and team. And when I talked to friends, I was like, is this obnoxious? Is this lying to say this? And they were like, no, I put on my LinkedIn resume, program director, parentheses GM. And so that's why I changed it to, so that I could make it clear to people I ran a business line. I didn't just like program director doesn't mean like community manager
Uh-huh.
moderating a Slack group or something. And then for my current Fortlight role, I had it's a very small team. It's really just like one full-time person, me and then part-time people. And so I asked Annie, the CEO, I was like, what title should I have? And she's, I don't know. So I literally wrote Jill of all trades.
Uh-huh.
Then I wrote chief of staff. Then I was like, can I change it to marketing, events, and operations? She's like, sure. And I might even evolve it again. But I'm trying to stuff it with keywords that they're going to expect. But as I mentioned, I'm still routing around the ATS by always doing referrals.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
Still, like, I asked ChatGPT, I've used ChatGPT very extensively in my job search. I found 5 relevant roles, pasted all the JDs in, and then it was like, here's my resume, update the language of every bullet point to match these 5 JDs.
Yep. Yep.
And that helped me do the pivot more effectively, I think. And now in my interviews, I don't even, in those first phone screens, I'm typically not getting people being like, okay, it doesn't seem like you have relevant experience. Like they're all like, oh,
I get it.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they
It's
get it.
at the fundamental level, it's all actually quite the same.
Yeah.
You mentioned telling a good story. I'm all about a good story. So what goes into crafting something that's compelling, especially when you need to convince somebody of something?
Definitely practicing that 2-minute pitch, using the language they want to hear and that they're familiar with, which is part of why I use ChatGPT to refine what I was saying. Did a lot of practice. And then I again used ChatGPT and said, here's the JD,
Mhm.
here's the granola notes from my previous call. Ask me 20 really hard-hitting top 0.1% questions that you think the hiring manager will ask.
Uh-huh.
And I couldn't do like voice to text, but I typed my answers and then they were like, here's what the answer was missing. It's a
Uh-huh.
7 out of 10. Here's what to say instead. The only way I got better at storytelling is a lot of practice and refining.
Mhm.
And because I've had such short jobs, I have done so many job searches, like nine in 10 years or something like that. So that's really been it for me. And hiring people and being on the other side and hearing what they say, and then thinking about how I evaluated them was a huge level up. And actually, in some of my communities, not some, but all the communities, people interviewed and I had to select them to be members and do like
Mhm.
a sales-ish process, but basically do admissions. I've gotten a lot of reps in listening to podcasts in the way that like successful people tell their story. I know that sometimes people like take a storytelling course, screenwrite or something. There's kind of unconventional ways that people figure this out for their career. This has just worked for me. I think there's a lot of ways to do it.
Yeah.
And also, I love public speaking already, and not everyone does. So that's another element where I think sometimes people feel like they have to practice that a lot. But I am not afraid from it. I really enjoy it. I host a lot of events, and that wasn't something that I felt unsure about. So it was more, and I asked people, how can I make this better? And they were like, make it shorter, make it punchier, leave out stuff that's not that impressive. Just don't even mention it. There's no point. Just do the highlights of what is impressive. Use like metrics even when you say it out loud, but not a crazy amount of metrics. But use the most impressive ones, like connect each one of them to the next one and connect it back to the JD and just advice like that over time.
Yeah. Something I think is interesting is that you, in response to the prompts, so first you prompted ChatGPT, ChatGPT gave you back potential questions you might receive, and then you told your story and then had ChatGPT refine it. I like that versus you asking ChatGPT what you should say and you trying to memorize it. Um,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Memorizing
you
didn't. Yeah.
first.
Yeah. Yeah. I did a lot of things and not all of it was helpful. So, like, when I said rewrite my resume, I had to redo every single bullet point
Yeah.
because it sounded like AI nonsense. So, I asked a lot of stuff. And then when they give the response that they say is great, I'm like, cool, I'm not going to talk like that.
Yeah.
But here's what I think is the biggest difference between what I said and what I should say that I should include.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that it's a relationship like any other where you have to filter through what makes sense for you. Any questions I can answer for you in our final moments together? No pressure to be coached, but you have me on the line. I love helping job seekers in particular because I mentioned this to you before we got on the podcast, but I feel like there is so much that job seekers can learn from an entrepreneurial mindset, especially as an entrepreneur who has gone through so many obstacles from getting sued by the men's rights organization to the pandemic decimating our major revenue source to my son's health condition to my own divorce. It's just been like trial after trial, sometimes quite literally. And in that, it's not just a thick skin, but a real, you have to find another way through that for many job seekers, especially now when the job search is taking so damn long, you've got to come through with a different way of looking at things, looking at yourself, and also putting yourself out there. So, on that note, anything I can help you with besides a referral?
Yeah, I have two other things I'd love to ask you about that are not related to networking. Is
Sure,
that
yeah. Anything and
okay?
everything.
Okay, two things. So obviously you're running Ladies Get Paid. And regarding negotiation, I have been always afraid to do this over the phone. I do it over email. But as you see, I'm comfortable putting myself out there. But for some reason, I freak out over doing this over the phone. And I'm curious if you have some tips for breaking that barrier and feeling like prepared. And then I know that like recruiters and talent leaders, they have so much more experience doing this with a zillion candidates that sometimes like not with ill intent, but they are trying to corner you to make sure that you're taking something that's not crazy high. And I stress out a lot at that. And so I'm curious, like, hopefully that will be something I'm doing again very soon.
Yeah.
And yeah, what tips do you have?
Yeah. So let me confirm. Let me just speak to the recruiter question for a second. Listen, it always has to be about what your goals are first and foremost. And so I encourage everybody to create a basement budget where if you had to say yes to something, what's the lowest number you could say yes to? And then what's the trade-off for it, right? Because sometimes we do say yes to lower numbers because we need to pivot and this is the only shot we're going to get to start over in a new industry. So at least know what's the cost benefit that you're willing to make first. So before you get into these conversations with anyone else, know it for yourself because sometimes when you're trying to figure it out in real time, you're getting, I don't know, pulled in too many different directions and you feel too much pressure, and then all of that clouds your vision. So make sure you know your bottom line and why. Okay, so there's that. And also a way to evaluate opportunities, right? What is this new, if you say yes, what are you saying yes to? What are all the things this is going to give to you? Your ability to learn, grow, not commute anywhere or commute, just all the pros and cons of it, right? And then how does that measure up to the money you're going to say yes to? Of course, how does this fit into the market? And this will lead me to your sort of nerves around negotiating on the phone, which, by the way, when you say phone, do you mean actual phone or do you mean like Zoom video or either?
Either one, but I've found that at the end, for some reason, they often say phone.
Okay.
And I'm, yeah.
I highly encourage everybody, but particularly women, do this where they can see you. Actually,
Okay.
yeah, do this where they can see you because so many nuances are lost otherwise. And especially for women and women of color, if we're socialized to be accommodating, people pleasers, yes, people, saying, no, wait, I'm asking for more, that can feel like we are going up against all of socialization, which is why you get so nervous. It's not you, it's your culture, it's our culture. So, this is why them seeing you is important because your body language, your smiling, your warmth, your excitement, the sparkle in your eye, all of that counts. Even think about when you receive an email or a text from somebody and you have misread it, right? Or you are injecting your own story into what they're saying. That was a short sentence. They seem really brusque. My
Yeah.
gosh, that's your interpretation. Let's not allow that to happen. We don't want any assumptions around what we're saying. It should all be extremely obvious where our intentions are. And the best way to demonstrate that is through, again, the not the words we say, but how we say it, the tone of
Yeah.
voice, right? So much of communication is never the words. It's all about everything around it. So remember that. But let me talk about research for a second. So this will really help you remember that this is not you asking for a favor or more for you means less for them or any of that bullshit. You will have done your market research so freaking well because you have a good network and you're going to ask people, hey, I'm in a negotiation for this job or I'm applying for this job based on my experience, based on the skills that I bring, based on my network, based on my extra perspective, right? Within the pay band, because every job has a range,
Yeah.
I'm going to be asking for the top. I think every single person here should ask for the top, by the way. Let them say no to you. Confirm that you know what the market research is. And the best way to do that is by talking to real people, particularly white men. And so your focus right now is how do you make the best case for the best paycheck? So when you ask for the top of the range, reminder, you're not asking for something random, okay?
Yeah.
Like they're expecting this. Your whole positioning is whatever you are asking for is an investment in their company, meaning when
Mm.
you make more, they make more. Okay. And so the value that you're providing, which you've demonstrated through the evidence, you've brought all those metrics of money made, money saved, right? Whatever extra money that they're going to be paying you is minimal compared to the value that you are creating for them. And this is not bullshit because if it was, then you wouldn't work there anymore,
Yeah.
presumably, right? Everybody has a margin on their paycheck. We all do. If you work for somebody else, they make money off of your efforts. So again, the delta, the case is all about what I make you, what I'm asking for is still less than what you will be making from my efforts. So this is where you sell them on the dream, right? This is what's fun about big ideas, big vision. It's the future.
Yeah.
You don't need to have hard proof about that. The only hard proof was that you've done work in the past that's comparable so they can trust you, that you have credibility here in what you're talking about. But when you kind of pivot, not just here's what I've done, but here's what I'm going to do, here's what I'm excited about, here's the areas in which we are going to be focusing, and what does that mean in terms of business impact?
Yeah.
Like pie in the sky shit. And by the way, for everybody watching, listening, is going, what I do doesn't really impact business bottom line. Bullshit. It always does. What you do impacts at least another team that
Yeah.
impacts another team that brings in the money, right? Again, money can be measured in money saved, time saved, processes saved. So Lots to say, obviously. You open up a whole can of worms for me over there, but you're just remind yourself you're rooted in the research and you're bringing your receipts and then you're pivoting to the big vision. It's all about investment. It's not fucking favors. More for you does not equal less for them. It's not a
Yeah.
zero sum game. And also, we're talking about a compromise, meaning both sides have to give up something in order to get something. So if you don't get what you're asking for, that's okay. You've got some backup asks, right? You're not walking away necessarily, right? And so you maybe give them some options after they say no. All right, cool. No worries. How about, and then this is whether it's a signing bonus or full compensation, you're asking for a coach, and here's why it's a benefit to you, you meaning the company, etc.
Yeah.
So you never feel like it's yes or no and that's it. That puts way too much pressure on it as well. So, was that helpful? I know I could keep going and going.
Yeah.
I'll pause there.
Well,
And how are you thinking? What are you feeling?
super helpful. Another thing that I tried to do, actually, in a company that I'm towards the end of the process with now, it's like community manager. And I feel like I am beyond that. I want to be senior community manager or head of community or something else. There is someone who's like head of who I'd report to.
Okay.
But I said to them, I said, the recruiter screen, she said, "Are you comfortable with the salary?" And I said, honestly, if there's next level after this, even the top of this range is below what I've been paid very recently for the past 4 years. And I would love to understand, is this team looking to hire somebody later this year? I am confident that I could probably do like half of that job and reduce the need for you to hire that person.
Ah,
I understand how team budgets work because I've managed them myself. Would you be open to bumping me up a level? And she's, I don't know, I have to figure out with the hiring manager. And then I talked to the hiring manager and said the same thing at the end of the call. He basically said the reverse. I have to talk to the talent team, but like our budget's our budget.
mhm.
And then I said, do you have any opportunity? I was like, okay, if entering at that level is the only option, is there an opportunity to be evaluated and get a promotion and potentially a bump within 3, 6, or 9 months? And he said, honestly, with our perf review cycle, it would take at least a year.
Mhm.
Is there any other thing that I can use in my tool belt? Like it might just be that there's no way to do it.
Yeah, I love your problem solving attitude. For anybody who's, I'm not good at negotiating. And then I ask you, are you good at problem solving? Do you consider yourself not a creative, but creative at problem solving? And if the answer is yes, you can be an excellent negotiator. So
Yeah.
so that's why I think you don't need to be as nervous as you have been, by the way, because you're clearly demonstrating that you can do this. In terms of this specific situation, oh, are you asking in this situation, is there anything else to be said, or moving forward, what might be ways in which you could alternative solutions you could come up with?
Yeah, for both, because those were the only things I could think of. It can do more than what you think. So if you're planning on hiring 3 people in the next 12 months, I think I could do so much that you wouldn't have to hire the second person as soon, and thus your budget for the year would be less. Or yeah, basically, if you have X annual budget for talent, I would delay the amount of time where you have to hire that next person and thus fit within your overall budget.
Yeah.
Or can I have some confidence that within 90 days we could rediscuss and then every 90 days talk about it each quarter and see if there's a bump. I don't know any other techniques. If there's anything else in yeah that I could try, I'd love to understand.
Before I jump into your specific situation, I want to give a framework to help both you and everybody watching and listening think about situations like these where it feels like you're stuck, but is there a different way to look at it? So maybe starting with constraints, right? What are all of the immovables it seems that this company is having? So based off of the things you asked them and their response, I was hearing there's like a set schedule for promotions. It sounds like they're not really willing to move outside of that or make exceptions. Another constraint is that there's a little bit of a hierarchy here where there's a person with your ideal title. That was one of them. Might be some other constraints as well. Then on the other side is opportunities. So sometimes there's an opportunity that's obvious at the company. Just by doing research, you see what is the CEO talking about on panels? Like what's their big vision? How are they differentiating themselves as with their competitors? What are they investing in? Who's invested in them? Just seeing where is their growth happening somewhere in the company should be a little like ding ding sound for you of, do I ally myself? Do I ally my pitch with where I'm seeing growth? And so then is it that you are pitching So to just give you a little check mark, you pitched a different way, a different scheduling cycle, or a different, you're doing someone else's job as well. That was
Yeah.
brilliant. Along those lines, I would say, what are some other opportunities? Completely rewriting the job description. I don't know. I mean, at this point, maybe the answer is no for them, but maybe also you have nothing to lose, where you've done more research on where they're at. Also, again, they're competitors. You almost treat this, it's a business school capstone project where you just send them a pitch, the 30, 60, 90 days of if you were hired with a completely different title, what you would be doing. Again, that's a very bold move, but
Yeah.
because here's the thing, the way that they are paying you for your current job title and current job description and current schedule is a no. However, let's talk about something that's completely different, right? Like this negotiation, according to these rules, is done.
Yeah.
So let's play a different game. And is the game a totally different role that has literally never been created? Okay, this is how I got, by the way, my jobs when I worked
Oh,
for other
nice.
this is
Yeah.
this is it was both a blessing and a curse. I started as a really an entrepreneur in that my first job out of college, it was somebody who knew they needed a fundraiser. It was a nonprofit. They needed a fundraiser to get younger people to donate, but they had no idea how to do it and they didn't even know how to hire for it. And I literally we met and I just said, "Can I pitch you a job?" And I gave them here's the outline of what I'd be doing, right? So that's one suggestion. Another suggestion would be if that's too bold, it would be taking the job as it is with a commission structure as well. So that's also adding on what you'd be doing, right? If you are bringing in business in some capacity, maybe you're taking a percentage of that business. And that feels a little safer, I think, for them to say yes to since it's not money out of their pocket right now. It's related to your success metrics. Those are two ideas off the top of my head.
Those are so cool. I love that, and I've never thought of that. But I've created roles, and so that bold JD thing makes a lot of sense. I could say I feel really confident that I could do everything on this existing JD in 70% of my time. But an additional 30%, I'd want to contribute to X huge initiative at the company with similar skills, and this is how I do it. Because I feel like when I look at a more junior role, part of my pitch to them and what I read is I can do this stuff in my sleep. So
Mhm.
I know I can do more because I am an IC that's beyond this.
Yeah.
And thus, I think I can do it I can do everything you want as a lower percentage of my time.
Yeah.
Um,
That
yeah,
also, but just for anyone here and going, I've also been told I'm overqualified and that's a big problem. Yes. So that's where I think, how can we position your overqualifications as a good thing? And it's always bang for your buck, right? So, yes, they might be spending a little bit more on you, but they're getting way more for it. And also, if a way too big of a salary base is not feasible right now, then it's structured where X months into it based off of those metrics. But also, I really do think commission.
yeah,
If
yeah,
you
that's cool.
believe in what you do, and by the way, it doesn't mean I don't want everyone to think commission has to be, oh, you went specifically and got a client to say yes and money. It could be you did something that then got somebody else that brought in the money, right? Like I'm sure there are sales departments, maybe they're not comfortable with you just like jumping in, but something where it is what you create is being leveraged to sell.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
again, I don't want you or anyone to think that means you like have to now be a salesperson, but you do have to contribute to something that the salespeople are leveraging, right? In some way. Or you're creating something, you're contributing to the product in such a way that now it expands the customer base. Or you come up with an idea that retains customers. So maybe it's not just, let's have a commission on new customers, but re-signings or something like that. And so think really outside the box. Put yourself in their shoes of if they are nervous about spending more money, not just how can you get them to feel like you're worth it, because they may go, she is worth it. We still just don't have enough. But how do you make it less scary for them to spend money? I'm speaking from a personal place here with you because as a business owner myself, I've had a couple of people I've thought about working with, wanted to work with, and quite frankly, I just couldn't afford them at the base salary they were asking. And
Yeah.
so I was saying, hey, here's commission on sponsors, et cetera, or commission on coaching clients, whatever. And they were not in the position to be able to say yes to it. Like they need money in their pockets today. And I totally respect that. But as a small business owner, I would be thrilled if I was able to get somebody who is way overqualified to see the vision of what we're building and see how there's 4 different ways that they could be making money. And base salary is just one of them. And that actually sometimes, if you're really savvy, commission or signing bonuses or structured bonuses, if you believe in what you do and you believe you are great and you're going to get returns, there's going to be metrics of success. Why would you not want to make money off of that?
Yeah, yeah. And I think another thing I think about is like a lot of people in the tech community industry are like, you can't map community, expect it to be like a magic bullet and immediately map to acquisition or retention.
Yeah.
But I don't fully believe that. And I really want to position myself. I want to see, I want to, instead of saying, oh, it's not possible, I want to say, how could I build this so it would be possible? And I feel like with the AI revolution and with the way that companies are evolving and the fact that the market is not what it was in like COVID ZERP, I recommend to everyone, like people asking me for job advice, try and figure out how to make yourself a revenue driver. And
Yes.
I don't remember what it's called, like a revenue sink or something in the company, but like basically the roles that are necessary for the business to function, but
Mhm.
your salary just detracts from their overall revenue. I recommend to everyone, I'm like, no, try and position it so it somehow brings it back to the
Yes.
business.
And I have a whole webinar called the LLC of Me, which
Oh,
is
nice.
my framework for how to see yourself as a job seeker and then position yourself that way. And there's this part of the webinar, which is free for everybody, by the way, and I'll have a link to it. There's a part in it that is about how to follow the money trail. So, how to go through, whether you're still at the company or you used to work there, the paper trail. Again, like how does the financial ecosystem work? What roles are integral to bringing in the money directly and which ones are a little bit more ancillary tends to get cut first. Oftentimes those are marketing community roles, PR, women are in those roles. There's a whole reason why we end up being the first people on the chopping blocks. So this is why I'm very passionate and I'm sure you're doing this, but I would really encourage you to do more of it if you're not, is build the case for why these roles do bring in money
Yeah.
and do that through LinkedIn, make your own little like white paper. So where you have this body of work that you are known for that, yes, tells the story of your wins, has your name front and center, but it will help other people both in your departments, but also the people who are responsible for either hiring or firing those folks to have a better understanding of what role you play in the revenue drivers. Because I do think there's a bit of convincing that has to be done as well. That's again why we all get nervous about this stuff because there's a lot of layers to it. I'm so glad that you asked this question. Obviously, I get very fired up about it and really glad to have you be part of the show, share your story, and I'm sure you're comfortable sharing your LinkedIn and how
Yeah,
people connect with you
totally.
to stay in touch. And if you want to give maybe a little pitch of what you do and what roles you're looking for, or how somebody can help you, listen, let's activate the Ladies Get Paid Network.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm looking for Series A through C software startup community or events roles, ideally community, but can have definitely an event element and B2B SaaS or AI. And I'm in New York City now. I'd love to stay in New York, but I'm also interviewing in SF. I think those are all the aspects. Yeah.
Awesome. Fantastic. All right,
Yeah.
Shreya,
Thank
thanks so
you.
much. Best of luck. Now
Thank
go.
you.